So we're going to learn about positioning. Now, positioning is very important on your website because if your widgets and your columns aren't positioned properly, when you come to view it on the front end or different size screens, it'll look very different. So we need to make sure that we have a good understanding of positioning and how to position before we start building. So there's two main factors required for positioning. So this is margin and padding. So these two things work in very similar ways. Margin works from the edge of the box to the start of the next container. So for example, if you have a text image, the margin is from the edge of that text image to the edge of that column. Now the padding works in a similar way, but it works from the edge of that widget or edge of that column inwards. So for example, if you had an image and you increase the padding, the image would actually appear to shrink because you're increasing the padding from the edge of the image inwards. We'll show you a little bit more how that looks later on in this explanation. So the next thing to consider is that with either margin or padding, we have four sides to this. The four main criteria for padding or for margin is top, right, bottom and left. Now if you visualize these like a clock, it will really help you kind of figure out which order it's supposed to go in. Now, as I mentioned before, if you add padding all around a widget like a image, it'll actually make that image appear like it is shrinking because you're adding equal padding all the way around. Now, if you were to add padding to just one side, for example, if you were to add padding to the left, the image would appear to be moving to the right because as you increase the padding on the left-hand side, the image looks like it's moving to the right. So that's a very good way to move images around. And now let's take a quick look at margin. So margin works in a very similar way. However, if you were to add margin equally all around a widget, it would appear as though all the other elements around it are being pushed away. So the image will actually stay the same size. And say if there's a text above it or a text below it, if you increase the margins, these texts will look like they're being pushed away. So let's dive into Elementor and I can show you how that looks in our page editor. Okay, so now we're in our test site page editor. We're going to mount Elementor to our page. So first we click Edit with Elementor. And that takes us to the page editor. So in this lesson we're going to be looking at margin and we're going to be looking at padding. So let's look at those individually. For this example we're going to use an image, so let's drag an image over. And we're just going to make it a more appropriate size so we can see it on one screen. And we're going to upload an image so it's a bit clearer on how to see things. So I've just uploaded a mock-up I did for a client of their mobile site. So we're going to see how this interacts with margin and padding. First I'm just going to make this image slightly smaller. There we go. So first we're going to add margin. So to help me illustrate that, I'm going to add some text above and below the image I'm working with. So to edit the margin, just click on the image, head to advanced, and you can see there's margin and padding here on the left hand side in your editor box. Now this little icon here indicates that everything is linked together, so every time I increase this by 1, it increases all the elements by 1. So if you keep increasing them, you can see that it appears like the image is pushing these elements away, when in fact all you're doing is increasing the gap from the edge of this image, which is here, to the edge of this text. So that shows you how it's done. Now for example, we only wanted to increase the gap here. You just click the unlink values and then just add to the bottom there, like so. Say we want to move the image to the right hand side of the screen, we would actually need to add margin to the left to push it to the right. And what that is doing is increasing the margin between the edge of this container to the edge of the image. And because you're increasing the space, it pushes the image to the right. So padding and margin can be applied to a widget, a column, and even the section. So that's always worth considering. So let's have a look how it looks in our preview. So now, for example, we want to increase the space of the edge of the text to the edge of the screen. Now, we can either select the text itself and add padding to the left of it, or margin to the left. But if we say have a long column with lots of multiple texts, it's actually easier to add that padding or that margin to the column itself, and that will then push it all in. So let me show you how it's done. So again, let's deselect, and we're going to add margin to the left. Now you can see here that it actually adds it to all. Now to look at padding. So padding will actually make the image shrink, because what you're doing is you're adding padding from the edge of the container to the edge of the image, rather than the edge of the element to the edge of the next element. So if I increase the padding, you'll see that the image slowly starts shrinking. And the same process, if I want the image to move to the right, I just unlink it, add padding to the left. So that's a quick summary of margin and padding.